the future of theatre. I feel like I always have to say it that way. But joining me on the future of theatre for this episode is an actor who has been making the rounds in DC. And I worked with him on a project. It was a small project, but since then I have been a loving fan and admirer. And I do believe that the rest of the DC community feels that way too. So let me go ahead and introduce a local favorite, Ahmad Kamal. Hello.
Bless you. Thank you for having me.
I want to say that we met towards the beginning of your come up, but we're sort of still in the midst of it, I will say.
Right.
I'm really excited to hear what your perspective is from the inside. Because do you, in the last few years, has it felt that way? Has it felt like you were getting stuff done?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, I think there's something about when we met. It was late 2015. I was just out of grad school, and so it was just in that midst of I actually don't know how anything works in this industry in the city, and I was very excited for that. It was very exciting to just be in that mindset of like, I submitted to this and that, and then the next day I'm going to submit to this and that. Oh, I didn't hear from this. That's okay. And I think that hustle was just super exciting and very, very invigorating at that time, especially having just come out of school. And I think it doesn't cross my mind until every like couple months, when at least pre-pandemic, where I recognize that like, oh, I'm not reaching out as much as I used to, and I'm being reached out to. And that was a very strange sensation. And I honestly never felt like I would get to that point, almost to a point where like I try to view it as not too much of a hindrance, where like, don't rely too much on people reaching out to you, continue to do your work and feel like you're earning those kinds of positions. But of course, like there's definitely been a lot of gratitude towards the way my career was heading. And I know like somebody like Tara, who like travels the country nonstop for her work. I was just on the cusp of starting that in March when the pandemic hit. Like I was literally on a regional gig in Arkansas, and we were about to go into tech, and we get an announcement from the board on March 13th that everything's kind of shutting down, which, you know, the entire country got to experience it.
Like, how did you start that rise up?
I think I had the education that I received in Bristol was very professionally oriented, where it did want to focus on how can you hit the ground running in whatever industry you end up in. So while we had that kind of craft work that I think is necessary and vital to a master's degree, there was also just that idea of like, okay, what are you building yourself up as? How are you going to sell yourself? And I think there's that conversation as actors is always ongoing, where how you change as a person and as a personality and as an entity every like 5 years, you sell yourself as a different thing. Like you can't always sell yourself as like, oh, I'm this archetype or that archetype. You're like, okay, well, I've changed as a human physically, but I've also changed emotionally and in terms of how I think about the world. So I need to revamp my business card, essentially.
Right.
But I think, I mean, I always, you know, I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, so I knew that I was going to be here for at least a little bit of time. And it was a kind of a way to kind of just like see how the engines run before if I were to make a move to New York or LA or whatever. But at the same time, I grew up watching the theater here, or not grew up, but like I saw a lot of theater here during my college years and stuff like that. And so I was fascinated by that. I was fascinated by the work that was being done here, because I felt like it was big enough to attract attention, but not necessarily to get lost in the giant pool of theater. And that to me was very attractive, and I think that provided a gateway to be able to say like, no, I want to hit the ground running here.
What can you tell me about the DC theater community? You know, before pandemic, before.
I do think that there is a strong sense of camaraderie within this business, especially within DC, where like word of mouth spreads around pretty quickly of the good things that you do as an artist, and of the bad things. And so your reputation means a lot here, because I think if you gain someone's trust, you will slowly gain the entire community's trust. So that can feel very rewarding when you feel like you're doing great work and then other people are recommending you to others and you're getting spread that way. At the same time, it can be difficult to break into if you're on the outside looking in. So you're then trying to find like, well, how do I separate myself? How do I stand out? How do I get this person's trust to move in? But I guess in my experience, and I won't speak on behalf of everybody, it's just in my own, I felt like I was given a chance, and I was given a chance in a very fortunate way. I mean, like the workshop that you and I worked on was among many pieces that were being developed in DC, focusing on the concept of Islamophobia, of the concept of the misconception of the Middle Eastern man specifically, but also of the Middle Eastern culture. That it opened a lot of doors for me because people were actively looking for Middle Eastern men. And at the time, there were only maybe 2 or 3 Middle Eastern actors that were quite active in the theater scene. Yeah. So it became like a very golden opportunity where I was like, okay, I'm seeing the same 3 actors at every single audition, and we're like, all right, I'll see you next week. We'll go to that thing and blah blah blah. And but it allowed me to be seen in a way that I don't think I would have been seen if DC wasn't interested in progressing that story in their plays. Yeah. And it's in a way that felt very fortunate. But like looking back on it now, or addressing where we want to go in the future, we want to move beyond that feeling of like tokenism of like audience, and recognizing that we've got a little bit more to go in terms of how do we truly do stories for everyone by everyone kind of thing.
Yeah. And do you feel like when you were going through these auditions, it was nice to have other people going through that experience also in a parallel way?
I think if I were to be going through that experience now, I would probably lean towards that. I know that I would venture to say that then I was much more objective driven and focusing on this concept of like, and most probably incorrectly to say like, these are my competition, focus on the job, get the job, like beat the other people kind of thing, which hopefully for the most part when I enter an audition room now, if I ever enter an audition room again, it's the concept is not beating others as much as showcasing your own talent, just showcase what you do. I do know that after the fact, like these two, specifically the 2 actors that I know are Maboud Ibrahimzadeh, if you know him, and Shravan Amin, who is now in New York, I believe, and he's doing like commercials and stuff in New York right now, so great for him. But we would speak to each other after the fact, like at bars or whatever, and it would be a conversation about like, what do you experience in this and what do you experience from that? And I've been grateful to have worked with both of them. Like we've been both cast in the same project together and gotten to have that kind of like exchange notes back and forth. But back then, no, I think I was very much like focus on the objective, be the one person of color that gets it kind of a thing.
Yes.
Versus the other person of color. And again, like I think I can sense you highlighting that is that that generation of theater really kind of pitted us against each other in a way. And it's just the nature that casting is to an extent, but at the same time, when you recognize that the story revolves around this like one token character, it plays a different bit of dynamic. I will at least venture to say that, like, including Shelter, which you and I worked on, and other pieces that I've worked on in the past, I never walked into an audition room for a piece that I didn't think agreed with my ideology.
Yeah.
I remember, like, just this concept of, like, I'm not going to, quote unquote, play, for my example, a terrorist if the message that's overall being shown is something that I feel like is necessary to promote. So,
yeah.
you know, I'm not gonna do a Law and Order type thing if it's not gonna tell the story that I need it to tell. And I think that's what matters most, is that, like, we're all hungry to be represented, but I think we have the wherewithal to not want to be represented in the way that Hollywood and Broadway has been representing us in the past.
Definitely. And so this question I'm a little scared to ask: has the theater community lost you? Because I will say, we love you, we love watching you on stage, but has this pandemic forced you to look at other routes to express yourself, of employment, of survival?
I think this pandemic, and again, like, this is, the theater industry during March to now has been on the cusp of two very big revolutions. There's one that's, like, the very technical, which is involved in the remaining safe within COVID times, and then wanting to find a new way to establish art. So that created things like Zoom readings, Zoom plays, filmed productions, and all that kind of stuff. So there's that kind of, how do we fit into this new world that exists? But of course, there's also an entirely different revolution that's going on within the theater industry that is revolving around the letters that, the statements that got released in June from We See You White American Theater, and stuff that's even going on now with the 12 Days of Watchmas, which is, like, the next step within that organization's declaration of events that are going on within the world. So I think the theater industry as a whole has its own reckoning. Within the technical aspect, of course, like, I think we've all had to, like, come to terms with the fact that our opportunities have become limited since March. And so you then have to find different ways to either express yourself artistically or to just make money.
Yeah.
And so that you then, you know, I personally have turned to voice acting. I'm trying to essentially hit the ground running all over again, but in an entirely different medium. So in that way, I've kind of attempted to find that purpose again of going, like, okay, I'm gonna submit to, like, 3 different student productions that are all gonna turn me down, but I don't care because I love it anyway. And you're finding an entirely different fire within that. But I don't think I'd say that like, I've left theater or anything like that. Do you think I mean, I know your attention to binge is going to only continue to grow. Do you think you are kind of moving away from the conventional theater medium?
I think I am tired of working for people who don't have big ideas. I think I am tired of having these same conversations over and over again, and us being like, well, what do we do? I don't know. All right, well, then we'll do nothing. That, I feel, that is a very big mentality in the theater industry, because there is a crisis of fatigue. What do you miss most about being in the rehearsal room, being on stage, the process?
I think there's something about, because I still feel this way when I watch movies right now, where I'm okay with seeing people's faces. Like, I don't look at people's faces and go, like, oh man, they should really have a mask on or something. But there's something about seeing people touch that's just so, and it's so unfortunate that, like, we've now reached a level where I personally think it's so bizarre seeing people touch or shake hands or high five or something. But I think there's something that accompanies that within the theater room, where physical touch translates to connection. And I think there's something that's like a very strong emotional component within the rehearsal room that I don't think can be mimicked in a Zoom rehearsal room. It's just not the same. And that's not me knocking digital productions. That's just saying that they are very different mediums. And, you know, I've heard you speak in past interviews that our future as an industry is not going to be without the digital medium anymore. We are betrothed from now on. And whether SAG, AFTRA, and Equity want to figure it out for themselves, like I hope they do, because it's going to be something that I think theaters now recognize this exists. Audio plays exist now, and they mean something, and they do something in an entirely different way. But there is something about live theater that's going to continue to provide both audiences and artists with a deeper level of connection that I don't think is prevalent in other mediums. So I would say that that's definitely the thing that I miss the most is just this feeling of like, let's get through the nitty gritty work kind of a thing, as an old teacher of mine used to say, we're in the mud together and just clearing it out, and as a result we're just learning about each other a little bit more. I think I miss deeply.
Yeah.
What about you? I want to hear the Freddy side of this.
Well, it's different for me because I've played so many roles in the rehearsal room. Like when I'm a dramaturg, I miss hearing someone else's great idea or the reinterpretation of something, and then me being like, oh. As a director, I miss telling people that was my idea. So, what do you think was your first big one? What was the first, like, oh, okay, I'm making it.
It's so hard. I place all of them in different places in my heart. I Call My Brothers with Forum Theater was, I think, the first time that I felt like really I took a giant step forward. I would say it's not about, I think, what role is best or best for my career, but it was more about like which one had a bigger range between the last role and this coming role. And I think I Call My Brothers was definitely like a huge jump forward, partially in that I was getting to work at a theater company for the second time, so they liked me enough to bring me back, and the fact that production was its own whirlwind of technical issues where one of the actors was sick during Tech Week and couldn't make it, and so he had to step down, and I ended up taking his role. So that was a huge shift to within a week of performances to suddenly go like, okay, I have to switch my entire mindset and focus on this entirely new character. But then also, again, as far as our previous conversation about the stories that we want to tell, this was a story that I deeply needed to tell, and not, I think, especially looking back at other roles, it felt like it was a story I wanted to tell to people like myself. Like, it wasn't to entertain people apart from me. It was like, no, this is a story that if I could have heard myself tell this a long time ago, it would have made a world of difference. So it felt very therapeutic in a way, even though I don't necessarily like saying that like theater is good for actors as therapy or whatever, but it felt very important to speak those words. And it was a very troubling tale about what it means to feel like you are the problem within a society, because you've been filled by media's prints of this is who you are. You are a certain type of person, and what does it mean to have to battle with your own confrontation of that? So I would say that was definitely one of the more pivotal roles that made me stand out in a way that made me drive my career forward. And again, that led to that kind of like oh, you've got to meet this person, you've got to meet Ahmad, you've got to blah blah blah, and it's just like, I'm
Mm.
okay, hi, and it just sort of led. I think it led to a lot of great opportunities. So I'm very grateful for what happened there.
Tell me about Gloria. How was that experience?
Oh man, it was a great experience. It was such a wonderful cast of people during a time where this concept of shootings within the workplace or within schools was unfortunately prevalent to the point that it can almost become numbing to us. And I think this Gloria was such a great opportunity to explore that with a different lens, because it was slightly comedic, but also very closely examined the concept of ambition and how detrimental it can be in certain environments. I think that was it was also a really great opportunity because I think, especially for the concept of an office environment, that's something that I've never gotten to be a part of, just because of the nature of our work. We don't really do 9 to 5.
Right.
But the audience was so tuned into that they provided an entirely new insight for what does it mean to have like the bitchy character, and like what evil does she bring into the work environment. And so it created a really interesting story where it felt like the audience was then continuing it for us in talkbacks and stuff like that. So that felt very exciting. And Woolly Mammoth is just such a great theater to work with, and the cast and the director were it was just such a strong camaraderie of like, let's sit together and hash this out.
Now you probably won't mention it, but Gloria was your Helen Hayes Award nominated performance.
You are so right. I won't mention it.
How was that? First off, how did you find out? I've always been curious as to how our community, like, is it the post in the morning? Like, how did someone call you?
I was literally just looking at this yesterday. My time hop just popped up where I found out about this as a tweet. And I was just looking at my previous stories, like the Theater Washington released their tweets, and somebody sent me the tweet for it, and I was like, oh cool, like so and so, I know Justin Weeks, like he got nominated, that's so cool. And I'm like looking up and I see my own name, I was like, okay.
But this was one of 2 nominations you got that year. I believe you were also nominated with the cast as well as the ensemble.
Yeah, okay. We got nominated for Best Ensemble as well. So it was a great I think opportunity to feel like other people recognizing the hard work that we were doing, and it just kind of like, again, not necessary, but it's just an extra plus to feel like we reached through, and people heard us the way I think we intended. But yeah, no, I still have a screenshot of the tweet, and it's just there. Like, it's just in my phone forever now.
Tell me about everybody.
Everybody, oh man, I mean, that play was its own behemoth. For the concept of the fact that these 5 actors essentially have to memorize the whole play. But even for my role, this idea of just like, I sat in the audience of that show every single night. Every single night. And again, like it was a very fascinating process to be sitting next to people, hearing them comment on the show, and then my character is supposed to be leaving in this huff and a puff at the beginning, and then I reveal myself to be the character of Love. And so there were certain nights where when I would get up and leave, people would be like, yeah, I'll come with you. And there's like, oh no, he's part of the show, crap. Just like stuff like that. But it's interesting, as when you asked me to do this interview, I was reflecting specifically on that play. I think one of the best performances that we've had of that show were the student nights, or the student days, where they would invite a lot of high school kids to come see the play, because I think there's something about the students watching the show with no filter that allows them to be able to just, as soon as they see something, they react to it. And it's not it's not always inappropriate. It's a lot of times just loud, and it's exciting because you then have like, oh wow, let me react to that. Let me play with that feeling, and it's a clear sign that these kids were engaged and that they were watching the show, and it wasn't just about like, oh, like, is the formal audience happy and are they laughing at the right time or clapping at the right time? It's like, no, it was very raw, and it allowed for a lot of playful energy, which I think is really exciting. Again, this is the same thing with what do we miss about the idea of theater, or how is live theater different from digital theater? It's there's an energy that pervades the space that I don't think can be recreated in other mediums. Like, oh, I miss that so much. It's just to be able to hear people like breathe, audibly, I think is really exciting. It's not about like hearing laughter as much as like recognizing that they're breathing with you.
Community. What do you hope changes once we all get back to things? If we get back to things, what do you, Ahmad, what do you want to see different when we all get back into the theater, back into the rehearsal room?
Tara Moses brought up a great point when she said accessibility to the answer to this question, because I think there's something about again, we're in a position right now where theater is a little bit more accessible, whatever theater we have currently, because of the ability to reach across digital spaces. But my hope is that we're able to transfer that over once we return to live theater. To be able to say, we want this theater to be financially accessible, for it to be accessible across all genders, across all races and cultures, to have it be accessible in what the tales that are being told and for what reasons. Again, like I said, with the We See You White American Theater movement, a big part of it is this idea of make room at the table for us. We're not asking for the table, we just want room at the table. And a big part of that involves let us tell our stories our own way. Let us tell our stories to our people our own way, and whether that means breaking down the financial or the financial obstacles or the accessibility obstacles. I think that's incredibly important. And more than anything, I guess I hope that our theater, especially our DC theater community, embraces the community around it, embraces its local actors, and embraces the people that have helped build these theaters to where they are now, and to be open to everyone, because again, like I fully recognize my luck and privilege in getting to where I am, but I know it's not always like that for everybody. But the hope is to be able to allow this craft and this industry to be so open to the people around us, because if it does, we are in for one hell of a couple of seasons. Like to be able to tell really amazing stories with really, really great people.
Yeah. If nothing else, I am very excited to see you continue the come up, because it does feel like it's coming. It's coming.
Oh, bless you.
Where can people follow you if they do want to hire Ahmad Kamal?
Right here, baby. Instagram has been such a great medium for that. But like, I have my own website, ahmad-kamal.com, or just hit me up on this. Like both the website and my Instagram link to my email to reach out for everything. I'm available for this and for voice and for everything in between.
I love it. Ahmad, thank you so much for joining me on this snowy day of what month is, I don't
December. We're almost done.
I was.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
I'm always really bad at like starting and ending, so I understood. Cool, already. Thank you. I guess I will say bye.